The first report came from a house on Delmore Court, filed in the spring of 2009. The second came from a house on Faber Ridge Road, 11 miles away, in the winter of 2013. The third came from a rental duplex on Kessling Street, inside the town limits in the fall of 2017. Different families, different neighborhoods, no shared realtor, no shared builder, no relation by blood or acquaintance that I have ever been able to establish. What they share is a single sentence that appears in slightly different handwriting in all three of their statements to the county. Each of them, independently, told an intake officer that their house contained one more bedroom than it was supposed to have. I am not going to tell you these houses were haunted. That word does more harm than good in a case like this. I am going to tell you instead exactly what the paper says in the order I found it, and I am going to let the contradictions sit where they sit, because that is the only honest way to hand this to someone else. My name doesn't matter much for what follows, but my access does, so I'll explain it. For 19 years, I worked as a records examiner for the county assessor's office, which is a less interesting job than it sounds, and a more powerful one than most people realize. When a property changes hands, when it's improved, when a permit is pulled to add a deck or finish a basement or convert a garage, a document is generated. And eventually that document reaches a desk like the one I sat at. My work was reconciliation. I made the physical world and the paper world agree. If a survey said a lot was 0.34 acres and the deed said 0.31, I found out which was wrong and I fixed it, or I flagged it for someone who could. I was good at it because I was patient, and because I distrusted round numbers, and because I had learned early that when two documents disagree, the interesting question is never which one is lying. The interesting question is why someone needed them to disagree. I retired in the spring, alone in a house that had been built for two people. My wife died 4 years ago in the bedroom next to the linen closet at the end of our hall, and I have not moved her towels out of that closet. And I mention this now before any of the rest of it because I don't want you to think later that I sprang it on you. It matters from the beginning. It just took me a while to understand how much. Part of retiring for me was clearing out the personal cabinet I'd kept in the file room. That's where this begins, honestly not in any of the three houses. It begins with a folder I did not remember starting. The folder was labeled in my own handwriting. The tab read, in blue ink, "Square footage discrepancies do not close." I recognize the hand as mine the way you recognize your own voice on a recording, which is to say with a small delay and a small flinch. Inside were photocopies of 3 appraisal packets, each from a different year, each stapled and paper clipped the way I used to do it, with the clip at an angle so the pages fanned. I had a habit. I never used clips straight, and these were angled. So at some point I had assembled this folder, and I had no memory of it whatsoever. I want to stress that this is not on its own alarming. I handled thousands of files. A person forgets. But I have a good memory for anomalies, specifically because anomalies were the only interesting part of the job. And I would have remembered these 3. I know that now. At the time I just thought, I'm getting older. And I sat down at the long table in the file room to read what past me had thought was worth keeping. The Delmore Court packet was the oldest, a single-story ranch, built 1971, purchased in 2007 by a couple I'll call the Averys, because their real name is in enough trouble already without me adding to it. The appraisal from the 2007 sale listed 3 bedrooms and a total living area of 1,540 square feet. Standard? Unremarkable. The kind of house that makes up most of the county and most of the country. Attached to the back of the packet, though, was a second document, and this is where my past self had drawn a small blue box around a number. It was a reappraisal from 2009, ordered after a homeowner complaint. I've read a lot of homeowner complaints. They are almost always about the assessed value being too high, because people believe the county is trying to tax them into the ground, and they are almost always right that the process is opaque and almost always wrong that it's personal. The Avery's complaint was not about value. The complaint, transcribed by an intake officer named R. Soul, read as follows. I'm going to quote it exactly because the phrasing matters. Owners report the interior of the residence contains 4 bedrooms. County records and prior appraisal reflect 3. Owners request the record be corrected to reflect the actual number of rooms so that they are not held responsible for a room they did not build. Not held responsible for a room they did not build. Read that again the way I read it, as someone whose entire career was making the map match the territory. Homeowners do not complain that their house is bigger than the record. They complain the opposite. Extra square footage is extra tax. A person who finds a 4th bedroom and reports it to the county is a person volunteering to pay more money. And in 19 years, I never once saw anyone do that by accident, let alone insist on it. The reappraisal that followed the complaint was performed by a field appraiser whose initials were J.K. His notes were brief and, I thought, slightly annoyed the way field notes get when someone's been sent out over what looks like a waste of time. He wrote that he had walked the interior with the owner present. He wrote that the residence contained 3 bedrooms, consistent with the prior appraisal and with the original 1971 build. He wrote, and I'm quoting again, owner insistent regarding a 4th room at the end of the hall. Hall terminates at a linen closet. No door, no 4th room. Owner did not dispute the closet was a closet during walkthrough. Recommend no change to record. So the field appraiser saw 3 bedrooms and a linen closet. The owners, in their written complaint, described 4 bedrooms. And here's the detail that my past self had underlined, not boxed, underlined, which was a heavier mark for me. Something I did when I wanted a future person to slow down. The appraiser's line, owner did not dispute the closet was a closet during walkthrough. During the walkthrough, standing in the hall with the appraiser next to them, the Averys agreed it was a closet. But their written complaint, filed the same week, insisted it was a bedroom. Both statements came from the same people within days of each other. One of them was made inside the house. The other was made at the county intake desk downtown on paper. I sat with that for a while. It is the kind of contradiction that, in my old job, I would have resolved by picking up a phone. People misremember. People exaggerate to intake clerks and then get shy in front of an official with a clipboard. There are a dozen mundane readings. I've used all of them, but my past self had underlined the line and clipped the packet at an angle and put it in a folder that said, "Do not close." And I had learned a long time ago to trust the version of me that had done the work when the work was fresh. The second packet, Faber Ridge Road, followed the same shape and immediately complicated it. A 2-story house, built 1994, 4 bedrooms on the original plan, purchased 2011 by a family I'll call the Osorios. Their complaint reached the county in the winter of 2013, and the language was so close to the Averys that when I first read it, I thought I'd flip back to the wrong page. Owners report the residence contains 5 bedrooms, one more than the record reflects. Owners request correction so as not to be responsible for a room they did not build. The same construction, not to be responsible for a room they did not build. 2 families, 4 years and 11 miles apart, no connection I could find, using nearly identical phrasing to describe a nearly identical impossibility and using it to ask the county for the one thing homeowners never ask for, to be taxed more. And this is how I came to read it much later, to be believed. To have it written down somewhere official that the room was not their doing. The field appraiser for Faber Ridge was a different person, a woman whose initials were MT. Her notes were the longest in the folder and the least composed. Appraisers are trained to keep the personal out of a report, and hers kept slipping. She confirmed 4 bedrooms consistent with the 1994 plan, a bonus room over the garage, correctly not classified as a bedroom because it lacked a closet and an egress window. Then she wrote something JK hadn't. Owner walked me to the upstairs hall and indicated a doorway between bedroom 3 and bedroom 4. I observed wall. Owner became distressed and stated the door is not always there. I did not observe a door or evidence of a framed opening. Wall finish and baseboard continuous. No change to record recommended. And then crammed into the margin in different ink, as if added after she'd already signed the report and couldn't leave it alone. Owner asked me if I had ever noticed a room in my own house that I couldn't remember the shape of. I told her no. This is not true. I have not slept well since this appointment. That margin note was not in the Delmore packet's register at all. JK had been annoyed and closed the door on it. MT had opened one. My past self had boxed her line about the doorway and underneath in the same blue ink, had written a note I did not remember making, one that put a cold weight behind my sternum when I read it. Same closet, same end of hall, measure it. I had not seen the 3rd packet yet when I first read that instruction, or I had, and I'm telling this in the order the folder revealed it rather than the order I lived it, and the two have gotten harder for me to keep apart. But the instruction was clear enough. Measure the distance. In both houses, the disputed rooms sat at the same relative position the end of a hall, past the last acknowledged bedroom, where the plan showed either a closet or a blank wall. The 3rd packet is the one where the paper stops behaving like paper, and it's also the one where I finally did what a records examiner is supposed to do before believing anything. I went looking for the boring explanation, and for once I found one, and it took me 2 weeks to rule it out. Kessling Street, a rental duplex inside town, built 1958, converted to 2 units in the 1980s. The complaint, fall 2017, came not from an owner, but from a tenant, a young man renting the north unit. And it wasn't filed as a correction request because tenants can't request corrections to a property record. It was filed as a habitability complaint, routed to code enforcement, and it landed in the county system only because code enforcement cross-references the assessor's file when they open a case. The tenant, whose name I'll withhold, told the code officer that his unit had a room he couldn't account for. His exact words, per the officer's transcription: "There's a bedroom I don't pay for. It's at the end of the hall. My lease says 1 bedroom. There's 2. I keep the door shut. I want it on the record that I didn't add it because I think I'm going to be blamed for it. I want it on the record that I didn't add it because I think I'm going to be blamed for it." A third voice, a third variation, from a man who could not have read the other two complaints? Those were sealed in county files no member of the public could reach, that I could barely reach, sitting in 3 separate storage boxes until my past self pulled them into one folder and clipped it at an angle. Here's where I found my mundane lead, and I chased it hard because a records examiner who reaches for the impossible before exhausting the possible isn't doing the job. The 1980s conversion of the Kesseling duplex had been done by a landlord, now deceased, who I traced to 6 other conversions in the same decade, all cheap, all done without much permitting rigor. I spent 11 days pulling plans on all 6, thinking I'd found it. A sloppy contractor who habitually mismeasured hallways, understated square footage on the paperwork to keep his tax basis low, and left a gap between what he built and what he filed. It fit. It was exactly the kind of mundane explanation my job had trained me to want. 4 of the 6 other units had discrepancies of a few feet between filed plan and physical wall. None of them had 10 by 11. None of them had a second bedroom. None of them had a tenant who'd never lived in a Kesseling property in his life. I chased it because I wanted it to be true, and it wasn't. And closing that door cost me 2 weeks. I don't regret spending. The code officer who took the Kesseling complaint did something the 2 appraisers hadn't. He went out at the tenant's request and stapled a hand-drawn floor plan to his report. Code officers sketch units all the time. It's routine. What was not routine was that his sketch showed the north unit with 2 bedrooms. He had drawn the disputed room at the end of the hall, past the acknowledged bedroom, with a dimension written inside it 10 feet by 11, and beside it, "Tenant will not enter." I entered, room is empty, no fixtures, no outlet covers, no light. Cold. Recommend owner clarify permit history for this room as it does not appear on filed plans. A room that a county code officer had physically stood inside and measured did not exist on any document except the one he had just made. That's where the folder's contents ended and my own work began. Though calling it an investigation gives it more structure than it had at first. I pulled the originals from the annex, Delmore from 2009, Faber Ridge from 2013, Kesseling from 2017, each in its correct box among hundreds of other unremarkable files, each bearing the correct intake stamps and the correct handwriting and the correct staples and clips. Someone had not planted these. They had been generated by the ordinary machinery of the county over an 8-year span, filed correctly, and forgotten until they weren't. When I laid the 3 originals next to each other on the annex table, I saw what my past self had told me to measure. I had spent 19 years reading floor plans, the way other people read faces, and the disputed rooms in all 3 houses were the same size, not similar. The same. 10 by 11 at the end of 3 halls past the last real bedroom reported by 3 families who did not know each other and used the same words to beg the county to write down that the room was not their fault. I checked the builders. 3 different companies across 3 decades, 1 long defunct. I checked the plats, the surveyors, the title companies, the banks, the permit expediters. Nothing shared. I checked the intake clerks, thinking maybe one person's habitual phrasing had bled into 3 unrelated complaints, and I was reading a pattern into ordinary coincidence. But 3 different clerks took the 3 complaints, and Sowell, who took the first, had retired and left the state a year later, long before the 3rd complaint was ever filed. There was no human channel by which these families could have coordinated their language. The only thing connecting the 3 houses was the room itself, and the fact that everyone who lived with it eventually asked a government office in almost the same breath to be absolved of it. I found the Averys first. They had sold Delmore Court in 2010 and moved across the county. I called on a weekday afternoon, explained who I was, and there was a silence long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then the wife said, "Is it about the room? Not the house, not the taxes. The room. Flat. The way you say something you've been waiting a long time to be asked about." She told me the hall had ended in a real linen closet when they moved in, 2 feet deep, towels in it. Sometime in their second year, the closet started being deeper, her word deeper. You'd open it for a towel, and there'd be more dark behind the shelves than there used to be. And then one week the shelves were gone, and it was a room, 10 by 11, empty, cold, with a real door and a real brass knob that matched every other door in the hall, down to the same paint drip along the top edge that the original 1971 painter had left on all of them. That was what frightened her most. Not that the room appeared, that it appeared correct. I asked why they'd filed the complaint. She said, "Because we thought if we could get it written down somewhere that it wasn't ours, it wouldn't be able to say we'd agreed to it." She said it felt like the room was waiting for them to accept it had always been there, and that the day they stopped noticing it was new was the day something would be decided. Putting it in an official record, making the county say the house had 3 bedrooms, was a way of keeping the truth from sliding. As long as the county said 3, we could still see it was 4. Once the county said 4, we'd have lost the count. She said they sold the house and never told the buyers. She was sorry. She'd wondered for 11 years whether the next family had to deal with it and never had the courage to call and ask. Then she hung up, and the number was disconnected the next day. I called the current owner of Delmore Court instead. He was cheerful, a little confused about why the county would call. 3 bedrooms, he said. A linen closet at the end of the hall. His wife kept towels in it, ordinary. I apologized for bothering him and sat in my car for a long time. 3 at Delmore Court now. The room was gone, or the count had settled and reversed, or the Averys had left before it decided, and the house had healed over like skin over a splinter. The next family kept their towels in the closet and never knew. The Faber Ridge family did not leave in time. I found that out, reading the estate records, which is its own story, and not one I'll draw out, because by then I had stopped needing more evidence that the pattern was real. What I needed to tell you about first is the folder itself, because this is the point where the paper stopped documenting the thing and started doing the thing. I kept the folder at home, at a desk in my spare room, at the end of the upstairs hall past my own bedroom. I worked there for about a week, cross-referencing, building a timeline. One night I laid out the 3 floor plans, the 3 complaints, my own notes, and went to bed. In the morning there was a 4th floor plan. Same hand-drawn style as the Kessling sketch. A hall, a bedroom, and past it a room 10 by 11, empty, cold, noted in the corner. But the Kessling plan was still there, separate, in its own packet. This was a 4th sketch of a 4th hall, and the proportions were mine. I knew the little offset where my linen closet sat. The handwriting in the corner that said empty cold was mine. I did not draw it. I know that the way you know you didn't walk to the kitchen in your sleep, and yet the glass is on the counter. But it was my hand. I understood then what the folder had been for. It wasn't a record of an investigation, it was a count. As long as 3 complaints sat in it, drawn and labeled and boxed, the room stayed a thing that had happened to 3 other families held at arm's length contained. My past self had kept the count at 3 on purpose. Do not close meant, do not let it resolve. The Avery woman was right. The day you stop noticing the room is new is the day the count settles, and the folder was built to refuse that settling. I hadn't let myself remember building it because remembering meant admitting why I needed it. I went and looked at the end of my own hall. Linen closet 2 feet deep, my wife's towels still in it. I measured it with a tape from the toolbox. 2 feet exactly, I said out loud, "You are 2 feet deep," and closed the door. I decided to keep the count. I didn't burn the folder that would close it. I didn't add the 4th sketch to the folder either because I couldn't be sure whether adding it kept the count at 4 or just documented it, and I wasn't willing to make a move I couldn't reason through. Instead, I did what my past self had done. Every day I open the folder, read the 3 complaints, say the number 3 out loud. Every day I measure the closet. 2 feet, still 2 feet. Here's what I've learned about the mechanism, which the 3 families never lived long enough to learn. The room doesn't force its way in. It's a settling of the record, and it waits for the count to relax. The Averys held theirs with a county complaint, long enough to sell. The Osorios held theirs for 2 years, and then the wife died an aneurysm, ordinary, nothing sinister, and the house sold in the estate sale as a 5-bedroom. The appraisal for that sale lists 5 bedrooms, and the 5th is 10 by 11 between what used to be bedroom 3 and bedroom 4, with the door permanently on the plan, no permit ever filed because none was ever needed. As far as the county is concerned, it was always there. The count settled when the person keeping it stopped. For whatever ordinary reason a person stops. The room becomes true, and the next family keeps an exercise bike in it and never knows. A woman held a count against it until she couldn't anymore. The Kessling tenant broke his lease within a month of filing his complaint. I found him. He was fine. When I asked about the room, he said, "What room?" Genuine confusion, no fear in it at all. He'd gotten out fast enough and far enough that it let him go entirely, and took the memory with it. I told him I had the wrong number and let him keep the blank. That's the only mercy I've found in any of this. I didn't leave fast enough. I've lived in this house for 31 years. My wife died in the bedroom next to the closet, and I'm not going to move. And I think the folder knew that about me before I did. That's why the 4th sketch is my house and not some 4th stranger's. My past self never wrote his own house into the folder. He was keeping me out of the count for as long as he could. I'm past that now. 4 sketches. 3 stay in the folder. 1 stays in my pocket. I read 3 every morning and measure 2 feet every night. And I'm writing this down because a count held by 1 person is a count that ends when that person does. And that's exactly the condition the room is patient for. So I'm widening it. There's a room 10 feet by 11 that arrives at the end of a hall past the last real bedroom. It comes with a matching door and a 40-year-old paint drip. It grows out of a closet or a blank wall over a period of months. It's cold and empty and asks only to be accepted as ordinary. And the record of your own house will rewrite itself to agree with it the moment you stop noticing that it's new. You're keeping the count now, too. Somewhere there's a linen closet getting deeper. Somewhere there's a wall between bedroom 3 and bedroom 4 growing a door with the right knob. 2 nights ago, I opened the folder and counted 3, the way I do. Underneath the 3rd, where there had been nothing, there was a 4th complaint Form blank, county intake stock, the current version, with a 2019 revision code in the corner, a form that didn't exist when any of this began, which means it wasn't taken from any file I have access to. It has a space for a name, a space for an address, a line reading in the pre-printed county language, nature of correction requested. In that space, in blue ink, in a hand I'm no longer certain is only mine, 4 words are written, not held responsible for. The sentence isn't finished. I check the form every day to see whether another word has appeared. So far it hasn't. But last night I noticed something the form hadn't shown me before, tucked in the box above the signature line, in the same pre-printed county type as everything else. The kind of line that's always been on the form and that I had simply never had cause to read closely until a form filled itself in front of me. It says, complainant will be notified when correction is entered. There's no line for a phone number. There's no line for an address to send the notice to. There's just my name, already typed in the box marked complainant in the county's own font. The way names get typed onto forms after they've been processed and filed and closed. I keep the folder open. Do not close it. I don't know yet whether a form that already has your name typed on it in the county's font is a form that hasn't been filed or one that has.